This is a presentation of countries that no longer exist. This list was originally seen online and updated for some countries which were not on the list. The list can be considered inaccurate and incomplete for the brevity and recognition of some countries, but attempts were made to note historical moments in which countries no longer exist now. One of the lists used in the composition an A to Z list of countries that no longer exist at thoughtco.com. The first one up is called the Republic of Venus, which lasted about 1100 years. The most serene Republic of Venus thrived more than a millennium. Founded in 697, the iconic city-state became a hugely influential maritime and economic power, enabling its fabulously wealthy merchant class to spend lavishly on beautiful buildings and art. At its peak, Venice spanned modern-day northeast Italy and part of Croatia, Albania, and Greece. The republic's power waned in the 18th century as trade routes opened up and a series of crushing defeats decimated the navy, and Venus was overrun by French and Austrian troops in 1797. It was subsequently divided up by the respective empires. Puerto Mixo. Wedged between Spain and Portugal and northwestern Iberia, this tiny microstate operated as a free and independent nation for a staggering 7 centuries or 1,000 years. I'm not sure what calculation is used. It was a quirk in medieval manorial relations which put it outside the control of both countries. I'm sure that's good. I didn't look it up. It was made up of 3 minuscule villages. Puerto Mixto enjoyed all sorts of privileges, from tax-free status to the right to grant asylum. This special treatment was never going to last forever, and of course the microstate was finally abolished in the Treaty of Lisbon in 1864. Next is the Kingdom of Bohemia. This Varinal kingdom, which more or less covered the modern-day Czech Republic, was established at the end of the 12th century by the royal house of Przemyslid. It formed part of the Holy Roman Empire and was a complex of largely independent states that spanned Central Europe. The kingdom at its height was during the so-called Golden Age of the Czech history in the 14th century, when the Holy Roman Empire collapsed in 1806. Bohemia was absorbed into the Austrian Empire. It survived until 1918, when it formed the integral parts of the newly created Czechoslovakia. And then Czechoslovakia, which was carved out of the former territories of the Austria-Hungary, which included the Kingdom of Bohemia. Czechoslovakia was born in 1918. The Central European nation started out as a democratic republic but became a communist satellite state of the USSR in 1946. The nation remained communist until 1989, when the peaceful Velvet Revolution ended the one-party rule. This was followed by increasing nationalist sentiment among the Czechs and Slovaks, which promoted the dissolution of the country in 1992, and it split the following year or two into the sovereign states of the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Yugoslavia, called the land of the Southern Slavs. It became in being in 1918 following the collapse of the Austrian-Hungary. The country was a kingdom until the Second World War, when King Peter was deposed and Yugoslavia became a socialist republic under the dictator Josip Broz Tito. Tito was successful in holding the country together, but after his death in 1980, simmering ethnic tensions came to the forefront as the economy faltered. Slovenia and Croatia declared independence in 1991, and the bitter Yugoslav wars that followed led to the breakup of the nation in 1992. Moldavia. Located in modern Romania, Moldavia, and the Ukraine, the Principality of Moldavia was founded in 1934 and remained an independent state until ruler Bogdan III, the One-Eyed, submitted to Ottoman rule in 1514. Moldavia, nevertheless, enjoyed a great degree of autonomy and was distinct for centuries. The nation's end came in 1859 when it merged with Wallachia and went on to form the basis of modern Romania. Austria-Hungary. The Austrian Empire was devastated by the Austro-Prussian War of 1866 and forced to enter a mutually beneficial union with its neighbor, the Kingdom of Hungary. The following year, a force to be reckoned with, the Austria-Hungary became a key European power player. Abyssinia, aka the Ethiopian Empire, was a kingdom that encompassed what is modern-day Ethiopia and later down the line Eritrea. It endured for 7 centuries. The nation was controlled by the Solomonic dynasty, who claimed descent from the biblical King Solomon and Queen of Sheba. Abyssinia was the only national nation aside from Liberia to resist colonization during the 19th century scramble for Africa, and it existed in 1970 until 1974, when Emperor Haile Selassie was deposed by the communist Derg, which went on to establish the People's Republic of Ethiopia. Kingdom of Sardinia. The precursor to modern Italy, the Kingdom of Sardinia was created in 1324 by James II of Aragon and went on to become part of the Spanish Empire. It was ceded in 1720 to the Duke of Savoy, who unified that territory with his possessions on the Italian mainland. The kingdom was united under a single system in 1848 and had annexed Lombardy, the kingdoms of the Two Sicilies, and the central Italian states by 1861. That same year, the Kingdom of Sardinia changed its name to the Kingdom of Italy, and the capital was moved from Turin to Florence and eventually Rome. The Ayutthaya Kingdom. The Ayutthaya Kingdom, which comprised much of modern-day Thailand, had become richer than many European nations by the 17th century. The Siamese Kingdom was a center of international trade, and its eponymous capital rivaled Paris in size and splendor. Sadly, the boom times didn't last. Trade declined in the 18th century, and a bloody game of thrones ensued. Weakened by economic strife and political instability, Ayutthaya was besieged by the Burmese army in 1765 and fell in 1767, marking the end of the once glorious realm. The Maurania Kingdom was founded in 1540 by King Adriamanello and covered most of Madagascar at its apex. The Maurania kings and queens are credited with advancing agriculture on the island and initiating trade with Europe. One of the victims of the 19th century scramble for Africa, the kingdom was invaded by France in 1883 and colonized in 1897, when it mainly became known as Malagasy Protectorate. Its last ruler was Queen Ranelagh III, who was exiled to French Algeria, where she died in 1917. The Kingdom of Dahomey was located in modern-day Benin. The Kingdom of Dahomey was established by around 1600 by the Fon people and grew to become a major regional power. Its economy was built on slavery and trade, and the country flourished as an independent state for several centuries. The Kingdom of Hawaii was formed in 1795 when the island states of Hawaii, Oahu, and Maui, Molokai, and Lanai united under the King Kamehameha the Great, a vulnerable nation located in a strategically important location. The kingdom had resisted attempts at colonization by the British and French. The U.S. was concerned Hawaii would be grabbed by a rival and wanted to prevent the monarchy rewriting the country's constitution to the detriment of American business interests. It backed a coup against Queen Liliuokalani in 1893 and went on to annex the kingdom in 1897. Gran Colombia. Inspired by the ideas of the Enlightenment, Venezuelan military leader Simon Bolivar launched a campaign in 1808 to liberate his country from Spanish rule, and went on to defeat the colonial power during the Venezuelan War of Independence. In 1819, the new independent Gran Colombia was created, which included Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and parts of Peru. Despite Bolivar's best efforts, the Union was marked by internal division, and after a period of just 12 years, the supersized nation was dissolved. New Granada. This South American country was part of Gran Colombia from 1819 to 1830 and was an independent country from 1830 to 1858. In 1858, the country became known as the Grenadine Confederation, and then the United States of New Granada in 1861, the United States of Colombia in 1863, and finally the Republic of Colombia in 1886. Republic of Texas. This is one of the technicalities. Texas was independent at one time. The independent Republic of Texas didn't last that long. The province was extended over modern day Texas, claimed parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, had a large population of U.S. settlers, and broke away from Mexico in 1836 during the Texas Revolution. Mexico refused to recognize the country and was a constant threat. Fearing an invasion, a majority of Texicans favored annexation by the U.S. despite initial opposition from the American government, which was reluctant at first to absorb a heavily independent slave-owning territory. Texas was annexed in 1846, becoming the 28th state. Confederate States of America. This one only existed so long as the war did. The Confederacy was formed by 7 slave-owning American states in 1861 following the inauguration of President Abraham Lincoln, who had campaigned on an anti-slavery platform. The unrecognized breakaway country grew to include a total of 11 states. Desperate to hold on to its slaves, the Confederacy attacked Union forces at Fort Sumter in 1861, triggering the American Civil War. After 4 years of fighting, the South surrendered, and the short-lived Confederacy was no more. The 13th Amendment had also passed that same year, outlawing slavery in the nation. Tibet. The ancient region of Tibet achieved a de facto independence in 1912 after the fall of China's Qing dynasty. Imperial Chinese forces were ejected, and the 13th Dalai Lama declared independence the following year. Though officially a protectorate of China, Tibet enjoyed considerable autonomy. This all came crashing down when the Chinese Communist Party defeated the nationalist government in the Chinese Civil War. In 1950, the People's Liberation Army entered Tibet, asserted Beijing's authority over the region, and ended its de facto independence the following year. Many people today still view it as an independent country, however. Or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. A key 20th century superpower, the USSR was formed in 1922 following a brutal civil war that ended in victory for the Communist Reds. A one-party state made up of numerous Soviet republics, the vast nation was at odds with the capitalist West since its inception. The clash of ideologies culminated in the Cold War, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear conflict. The country's rigid communist ethos was spelled by a downfall. By the 1980s, its economy and political system were crumbling. The death knell came in 1989 with the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, and the USSR was formally dissolved in 1991. East Germany. Germany was split into 3 Western zones and a single Soviet zone following the Second World War. The Western zones formed the Federal Republic of Germany, aka West Germany, while the Soviet zone became the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany. And even the country of Berlin, you see in the blow-up there, was also split, or the capital of Berlin. The Soviet satellite state, which had a strict Command economy erected the infamous Berlin Wall in 1961 to stop its citizens defecting to the more affluent West. By the late 1980s, the region was on death's door politically and economically. The peaceful revolution of 1989 dealt the final blow and led to the fall of the Iron Curtain and a reunification of Germany. South Vietnam, Communist revolutionary Ho Chi Minh, who declared independence from the French Indochina in 1945, captured much of northern Vietnam by the early 1950s and defeated the former colonial power in 1954. The peace talks that followed granted Vietnam independence and split the country into two zones, North Vietnam and South Vietnam, with elections planned for 1956 that would unite them. The South's anti-communist leader Ngo Dinh Diem refused to hold a reunification elections, and the North reacted by starting the bloody 20-year Vietnam War. Despite the involvement of the U.S., Australian, and Thai forces, the South was defeated by the Soviet Union and China back north, and the two zones were forcibly united in 1976 to create the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. United Arab Republic. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser dreamed of establishing a powerful pan-Arab state based on socialist principles and got the ball rolling in 1958 with the creation of the United Arab Republic, a union which was comprised of Egypt and Syria. The union itself lasted just 3 years. Egypt's dominance of the UAR and Nasser's socialist policies resulted in a backlash from the Syrian elite, and a coup ended the alliance in 1961. Egypt, however, retained the name for another 10 years. Rhodesia. Anxious to remain in power as Africa was decolonizing, the white minority government of Southern Rhodesia, which had been a UK colony since 1923, declared independence unilaterally in 1965. Though never recognized internationally, the illegal nation was a de facto country for 14 years. Resistance to the regime was fierce. The ensuing conflict was fought out between the Rhodesian government, Marxist-Leninist ZIPRA, and Robert Mugabe's ZANU, which emerged victorious. Hostilities ceased in 1979, ending the white minority rule, and the Republic of Zimbabwe was formally created the following year. Prussia was historically prominent German state that originated in 1525 with a duchy centered on the region of Prussia on the southeastern coast of the Baltic Sea. It was de facto dissolved by the emergency decree transferring powers of the Russian government to the German Chancellor Franz von Papen in 1932 and de jure by an Allied decree in 1947. For centuries, the House of Hohenzollern ruled Prussia, successfully expanding its size by way of an unusually well-organized and effective army. Prussia, with its first capital in Königsberg and then 1701 in Berlin, decisively shaped the history of Germany. The Kingdom of Naples comprised the part of the Italian peninsula known as the Papal States in 1282 and 1816. It was established by the War of the Sicilian Vespers when the island of Sicily revolted and was conquered by the Crown of Aragon, becoming a separate kingdom also called the Kingdom of Sicily. For much of its existence, the realm was contested between French and Spanish dynasties. In 1860, it reunited with the island of Sicily to form the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. The Kingdom of the Two Sicilies was located on southern Italy from 1816 to 1860. The kingdom was the largest sovereign state by population and size in Italy prior to Italian unification, comprising Sicily and all of the peninsula Italy south of the Papal States, covering most of the areas today's Mezzingoriano. The kingdom was formed when the Kingdom of Sicily merged with the Kingdom of Naples, which was officially known as the Kingdom of Sicily, so both kingdoms were named Sicily and were collectively known as the Two Sicilies. And the unified kingdom adopted this name. The king of the Two Sicilies was overthrown by Giuseppe Garibaldi in 1860 after which the people voted in a plebiscite to join the Savoy Kingdom of Sardinia. The annexation of the two Sicilies completed the final phase of Italian unification, and the new Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed in 1861. Bengal was an independent kingdom in southern Asia that existed from 1338 to 1539. The area has since been divided into the states of Bangladesh and India. Burma officially changed its name to Myanmar in 1989, however, many countries still have not recognized the change. Burma was the English name for the country dating back to the earlier years of the colonial period around the mid-18th century. The English adopted the name from the Portuguese name for the country, Birmania. Catalonia was an autonomous region of Spain. It remained independent from 1932 to 1934 and from 1936 to 1939. Ceylon was an island country off of the coast of India. It changed its name in 1972 to Sri Lanka. Corsica is a Mediterranean island ruled by various nations over the course of history, but had several brief periods of independence. Today, Corsica is a department of France. The recorded history of Corsica begins around 560 BCE, when Greeks from Phocaea in Asia Minor founded the town of Alaya on the east coast. Carthaginian domination followed in the 3rd century BCE until the whole of the island was conquered by the Romans in a series of campaigns from 259 to 163 BCE. East Pakistan. This area was a province of Pakistan from 1947 to 1971. It is now the independent state of Bangladesh. Newfoundland from 1907 to 1949. Newfoundland existed as the self-governing Dominion of Newfoundland. In 1949, Newfoundland joined Canada as a province. North Yemen and South Yemen. Yemen split in 1967 to two countries, North Yemen, aka the Yemen Arab Republic, and the South Yemen, aka the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. However, in 1990, the two rejoined to form a unified Yemen. Scotland, Wales, and England. This is another technicality. Despite advances in autonomy, part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, both Scotland and Wales were independent nations that eventually merged with England to form the United Kingdom. It's a longer, complex history than I'm listing here. Sikkim was an independent monarchy from the 17th century until 1975. It is now a part of northern India. Taiwan, while Taiwan exists, it is not always considered an independent country. However, it did represent China in the United Nations until 1971. The Ottoman Empire is one of the only empires I have listed. I may do a later show with the empires in it, but this one transferred, also known as the Turkish Empire. This empire began around 1300 and expanded to include parts of contemporary Russia, Turkey, Hungary, and the Balkans, Northern Africa, and the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire ceased to exist in 1923 when Turkey declared independence of what remained of the empire. Persia also was an empire. It's also on this list, but it also became a country briefly. Persian Empire extended from the Mediterranean Sea to India. Modern Persia was formed in the 16th century and later known as Iran. 6th century BC or 625 BC, the Achaemenid Empire era to the 20th century BC in the Qajar dynasty era of 1979. This concludes this presentation of countries which no longer exist on a world that is constant and ever changing. Bye-bye.